So, it's, I think, the first time in 2 years I'm presenting for a real audience. It's about my favorite research team, mentoring, so I'm very happy to be here. It's really a pleasure. And I would like to talk about our search for quality criteria in mentoring to work. Mentoring to work is a new developing mentoring field. It's very targeted. It means that an unemployed person is supported by a mentor to find a job. So this is a new field. And we did an evaluation of experimental startup projects. And what we saw in this evaluation was that screening was below standards. Not all mentors were fit for the job. They didn't have always intercultural competences. There was no closure in the mentoring relationship. They just went on, or they just didn't start. So there were some qualities in this mentoring programs. I see Julie looking at me. So Duo for a Job was not in that evaluation. But it was an evaluation within the Belgian field. So on the other hand, there was more government funding, and also the demands to work in a more qualitative way from governments. And we thought as researchers, well, if mentoring to work is going this way, well, it will end, they won't fund it anymore, so we have to do something. We didn't know what, but we have to do something about the quality of these projects. But the problem was there was no research about mentoring to work, so this was a new emerging field. There was like nothing. And I think this story I want to tell applies to every new emerging field of mentoring. So what did we do? We first thought, what is quality? Everyone talks about quality of mentoring, but what is quality? And I remembered the scheme from 20 years ago. I'm doing research for a long time. And it says you have 4 dimensions of quality. And I thought it was very applicable to mentoring. You have the client perspective, and it means quality is good when your clients, your mentors and your mentees are satisfied. A second perspective is the organization perspective, and that it says your quality is good if your organization is having a good financial management, a good human resource management, then you have good quality. Then you have the objective or the result perspective, and it says well, you have good quality if your objectives are reached. You have objectives as mentoring organization. If they are reached, well, then you have good quality. And then you have the process perspective, and it says quality assessment is not only about the objectives or results, but the process itself is important. So you have those 4 perspectives, and we had to start somewhere. So we said let's start with the process perspective. And why? Because if there is no process, there are no results. Easy. So we thought okay, let's start with this process, and let's try to talk about minimal criteria for mentoring. Not manuals or big manuals, it are starting organizations. Let's talk about minimal criteria every project should have. So when I talk about the process of mentoring, it's this. It's the same in, I think, almost every mentoring project. And what did we do? We didn't have evidence, so we thought let's start from existing quality criteria. And you have this kind of 6 umbrella organizations or specific organizations who are working about quality, and they all have their quality criteria in their own field. For youth, Action Zusammenwachsen is, for example, a German initiative from government aimed at migrant youth. You have the Scottish Mentoring Network, it's aimed at adults. So you have this kind of umbrella organizations working about quality. And what we did, we looked at it, and we just selected all criteria that are applicable on adult mentoring. So what did we do in the next step? We took this 35 criteria and we consulted practitioners to determine the appropriateness of the criteria, if additional criteria are needed, and what are minimal criteria. And I stress the practitioners because our aim was not to talk with the managers about what is quality, but to talk with the people on the floor. What do you think is quality? What do you think is important? And this quality criteria, the 35 criteria, were just a start to talk with the practitioners about what do you think is important, what's quality for you. And from this point, we developed a set of minimal criteria, and we want to start from there to build evidence about what works in this new emerging field of mentoring to work. And this is the quality exercise we did. I'm not going to explain the 35 or the 20 criteria. I don't have the time for that. It would be a bit boring too, I think. So, but I just want to discuss some findings. We compared the different labels, like I said. And it was quite interesting to see that like all these quality criteria are quite similar in the different fields, but the modalities seem to differ a bit. If you talk about 3 minutes, okay. If you talk, for example, about closure, some say like you have to manage closure, others have like checklists and a lot of things you have to do. So the principle of closure is the same, but the modalities differ. What was also remarkable is that you don't have a lot of criteria about the mentoring relationship. They are mostly lacking, nothing about activities, about what I call the black box of mentoring. We actually don't know what's happening between mentor and mentee. I heard it yesterday. So there are no criteria about this, and this is quite remarkable, to be honest. And then we also saw some differences. For example, an important difference, I think, is some labels or criteria focus on mentee training for mentees, and some don't. So that was, for me, an important difference between labels. We also had this discussion with practitioners. It were Belgian and Finnish practitioners. And also remarkable, they agreed upon almost all the quality criteria. Except for reference checks. I think this in adult mentoring, this is not very popular. They said like, if we do this, we don't find mentors. So this was, I think, a difference between adult mentoring and youth mentoring. And there was also not a lot of discussion about the applicability of the criteria, but there was discussion about modalities and what is minimal and additional. And this depends on, first, the program approach and the target group, but also on requirements of possible funders, and also, for a lot of organizations, on financial resources. I heard organizations say, oh, Peter, all those criteria are very interesting, but we don't have money for follow-up. So the financial resources are important when we talk about this quality and quality criteria. So I will conclude as an introduction to the panel. 9 minutes, I'm doing well. First question I had was, how universal are those quality criteria? Can this set of 35 criteria can be applied to the adult mentoring field as a whole? That's the first question. I don't have an answer. And a second was, like, we had all our quality criteria, and then we had something like, and what's next? We have our list. I think it were like 22 criteria, and now what? And we thought, like, is reflecting upon quality, is it sufficient? We did reflections with practitioners. They say, oh, interesting, it is an eye-opener. Is this enough? Is this okay? Or do we have to go a step further? And do we have to control if organizations work about quality? And if so, how do we foster a quality culture, not ticking boxes? Because one of the critics I got on this quality criteria was, oh, Peter, You have a list of criteria, you go to organizations, you go to the managers, and they say, oh yeah, we have it, we have it, we have it. Oh yeah, that's quality working. So how do you avoid this when you're working on quality? And a last question is like, are quality criteria the way forward? We just did this approach of quality criteria, but are there other ways to work about quality than working with this kind of quality criteria? So those are very difficult questions. I couldn't answer them, so we have the panel.
That's why you ask 3 other people to
to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you. Yes, very. Exactly. The goal is not to discuss the criteria themselves, but to scratch the surface on quality, to start, why is quality important? Like, we understood, Oscar talked about it, Samuel talked about it, we all talk about it. We don't want to do no harm. That's the main important goal, right? So please, Ute, Mar, Julie, and Peter, you want to join us?
Take some water.
Okay. I will pass the mic.